Hello, everyone. This is David Ellis, and I'm back with another episode on the IHN network. And we are here with Celine Kostler. Now, when I was thinking of people to bring on this show, we're going to be talking about relationships. I figured that a psychologist would be a very good fit for this topic. And so, Celine, introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody, and hi, David. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm Celine. I have a PhD in psychology, and I work in the field of forgiveness, mental health, and well-being, a lot of positive psychology interventions. So I think relationships is a topic which is, well, I mean, we're all stuck in relationships, good, bad, and ugly. So talking about it is not just a matter of importance, but sort of the need of the hour. So I'm glad that you're touching base on that today.
Good. The first thing I want to ask you is give a shout out to your business, Chimes. Tell us a little bit about that before we get into it.
So Chimes was conceptualized during the pandemic when I realized that people were in dire need of sort of interventions, codes, and somebody to be there for them. And the way I see therapy and the way I see counseling is not just reaching out when you're stuck or when you're suffering from severe depression or, having an anxiety attack, but sometimes just because you need to find yourself. Sometimes you just need to understand yourself better, feel a little more motivated, sort of, streamline your thought process. So conceptualizing Mind Chimes, the idea was to make this accessible to everybody rather than just a small group of people who were in need of dire help. And here we are.
Excellent. That's actually good work that you're doing because honestly, I've been doing work like this for a long time. And one of the things that I learned during COVID, it's sometimes not enough to just do one person at a time because there's not the ratio of people in mental health to the population. It's not fair, right? It's not fair.
Yeah.
So a lot of people fall through the cracks because they can't get the help that they need. So full disclosure, I know Celine through a student of mine, Nidhi. If you're watching this, I want you to just make a shout out. So Celine, you are her niece, and I just wanted to shout that out. Okay. All right. So let's get into relationships, and we're going to segment this to first of all family relationships. We're going to go to romantic relationships, and we're going to go to like business type, colleague type relationships in the workplace. Okay, let's start with family. That big elephant in the room that's always there when you go to family dinners and so on. There are obviously cultural undertones there. What are the basis of a good family type relationships?
Well, David, I truly think that any relationship, be it within the family or with a partner or even with your boss, has to be communication. A lot of times when we enter a situation, we sort of go with the idea that we will be understood whether or not we voice out how we're feeling. And if I trace it back to psychology and go back to Freud's theory of primary narcissism, we see how the child sort of cries, does not voice it out, and the parents understand what the child needs, whether it's a blanket or food or, just wanting to be soothed. But as we grow up, we develop the device, which is our voice box, to be able to convey what we need, to be able to say what we require, and we forget to use it. So communicating is the first step, especially within the families. And when you talk about culture, being from, an Indian background and having been raised in India for the first couple of years of my life, I have realized that sometimes the problem is not because you're not being heard, but it's because you're not voicing out what you have to say in a manner which is receptive. I can clarify it with an instance. whenever there's a heated argument, between parents and children, and this especially between the adolescent years and the teen years, oh, we all know that's a struggle. So the way the concerns are voiced out by the parents and by the children,
Hmm.
they tend to be a little more aggressive. And in that interview conversation, what gets picked up is the emotion of anger and not the content of the communication itself.
Excellent.
So I think that becomes very, very important when we're trying to put forth our point. It's not just about being calm, but being able to articulate in a manner that the other person does not have their guards up right away.
Yes, so there's so many roads we could go down here with the communication. First of all, there's a communication model that has been around for years between the receiver and the transmitter and the message in between and the discernment as to as what you just alluded to as to how your message is going to be received when it is transmitted. So let's take in the case of the parent trying to discipline a child. Okay. There used to be this model that if you spoke strongly and sternly enough, then everything is going to be all right. Okay? But what the child learns is sometimes fair, which can be misinterpreted by parents as respect. Okay, so what is your advice to parents in this regard?
Start off with the notion that I'm going to be their friend. I'm going to be their confidant. They're going to listen to me. But then the other side kicks in, where you realize that you also have to make sure that they're not going down the wrong path. This conflict is what sort of confuses the child as well, that the child starts to open up and the parents take on the disciplinary role, and then they want the child to listen and sort of adhere to the rules. So, like you're saying, it becomes fear and not respect. In a scenario like this, I think it would be nice for the parents themselves to reflect and understand that teenage and adolescence, especially, is a time where these conflicts will happen. They shouldn't take it personally. So, revolt is not against the parent or against the authority, but it's a part of growing up. And when you sort of depersonalize the experience and don't take it on yourself too strongly, you're able to sort of be there for the child as well.
Okay. There is this concept in a lot of communications. Communications has changed over the years. So now people tend to feel like they're being silenced because something there is a an inherent evil. I call it terroristic communication that has crept into our discourse. So you may like Colgate and I may like Crest. But if I shout over you enough times and I tell you like Colgate is better, like why are you like this? Why ad hominem attacks, etc., 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 right? I feel that I've won the argument because I have shouted the loudest, right? And a lot of people, this kind of communication pattern is seeping into our culture. It's seeping into our way of life. And what it does, it narrows the track of communication and it brings it down to he who shouts the loudest wins. I want you to speak on that because a lot of people need to hear that. A lot of people watching this broadcast, they need to hear this.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that comes from a deep rooted feeling that the individual themselves have, that they're not heard, that they're not valued. So it's not just about raising your voice, but the fact that your deep rooted insecurities are so strong that you are not being listened to, that you're not being understood,
Mhm.
that raising your voice becomes symbolic of you sort of putting yourself out there. So it's not just communicating with a raised voice, but it's also a cry for help that, hey, I'm standing here trying to communicate to you, and I feel like you're not listening to me. And I'm left with no other option than to scream. So hear me out. See, anger, I feel, is, and we've all talked about it, it's not just anger, it's a camouflage. And I think yours, for when you're screaming, when you're raising your voice, anger becomes a camouflage for the pain that you're feeling of not being understood. We're all human beings. We want people to be there for us. We want them to understand us. So I think that is a conflict that should be addressed. And if this is a pattern which is being repeated multiple times,
Mhm.
then I would see it as a cry for help rather than, establishing authority.
Yes, I think this is going to be one of these broadcasts which people are going to be playing over and over again. I want to pick up another topic, the concept of attacking as a means of getting attention or making a point. So let's use the Colgate and Crest episode. It's very basic and whatever. You're my sister, you like Colgate, I like Crest. And because you like Colgate, you're clearly a communist person, or you're a this or you're a that. The attack comes first as opposed to the reasoning pattern, all right? And so the emotions are something that you should not suppress, but then there is a certain amount of emotionality that you come across with, which can be interpreted as attack depending on who you are talking to. So we go back to the discernment again. But this concept of attacking, where do you think that comes from for a lot of people?
Well, I think again, attacking the other person becomes the easiest way to voice out how we're feeling. Um, like I said, therapy can be a process where you understand yourself.
Hmm.
And a lot of people don't go into therapy to understand themselves. They only go into it. It's like calling 911. You only call when there is an emergency. But whatever has been brewing inside comes to a boil, and it's only when it comes to a boil that you realized, oh, something is wrong. So these questions about having a stance where you're attacking, where you're talking in a way which has been the pattern, should be addressed when you start noticing that something's wrong. And it should not become such a strong part of your personality and of the kind of person you are that unwinding it takes a long process. So for me, I think identifying becomes the first stage. And when one person is in attack mode, and this is for any relationship, I think the other person has to mellow down, has to sort of understand. That's how it's like a seesaw. When one person is up, the other has to be down, and vice versa. That's how, there is balance. If both people want to be, high at the same time or low at the same time, that's not going to work.
Yeah, there is another aspect to this. I think people tend to get a lot of advice from magazines. Oh, I'm going to go there. People tend to get a lot of advice on relationships from magazines and from TikTok videos and so on. And I keep having to say that these are not good sources of relationship advice, okay? Right. Like I've read in magazines, little manipulative tactics and narcissism masking itself as relationship advice, and it's all over the internet. And the intent is that they're trying to make people win, right? And people see relationships from the point of view, the power dynamics. I have to be on top. I have to win. And so now there's a general me versus them kind of energy that's running inside relationships. And how does one who has been thoroughly poisoned by TikTok and Cosmopolitan um, detox themselves from that kind of thinking?
Well, the easiest would be to sort of uninstall the apps right away. But I do understand where you're coming from with the rise in what I would call as pseudo psychologists.
Correct.
There are a lot of people who want to give in their opinions, and I feel they're good at marketing themselves, so their opinion is more heard than those who actually spend time in the academia and their years and years and years of training and licensing. So, but the point remains that entering a relationship, and especially a romantic relationship, you have to understand that both individuals are coming from their own life histories. So when I feel that I am at war with another person,
Mhm.
it's not me or it's the other person, but it is also a culmination of my experiences that I've seen. Could be from my parents, could be from my family, could be from others around me. And now when I bring that into the relationship, you're right, it becomes a power struggle. But whom are you fighting? That's the question you need to ask. You're both on the same team. You're both working to build a future together. And if there is a power struggle, if there is a power dynamic, then I think that comes from the fear of being vulnerable. Because the world is opening up. boundaries are becoming less and less important, but we as individuals are becoming more and more vulnerable. With this vulnerability, we find it increasingly hard to put ourselves out there. Opening up, trusting others, communication, again, is not what it used to be. So when I operate from my vulnerability and I don't want to open up because I am scared that the other person will misuse it, then yes, I'm at war. So the war is not with the other person, but with your own self.
Yes. I remember a statement by an old professor of mine. He said the war begins when the communication stops.
That's true.
And the thing about it is that a lot of people have not understood this concept. So romantic relationships are usually the buzz, right? Not people don't realize that when they enter a relationship, they come with a certain amount of what we call, oh, I hate to use this word. I really do. I'm going to use it anyway because everybody's going to need to identify what it baggage on board.
Yeah.
Woo! That was like an ice pick in the head. People come with predispositions on board, right? And they come with it from their families. Now, I'm going to make an allusion to your culture because there was a very important and seminal text that was written some years ago called the Kama Sutra. Lots of psychology in there, right? One of the things that it said, which was kind of excessive, was that before you enter a relationship, you would have to have mastered 64 different skills first. Okay?
Yeah.
To learn to read, write, like sing, dance, and stuff like that. The point of it was to try to make people balanced human beings before entering into a relationship. But one of the subtle arts that it said is introspection. You had to introspect, meditate, and so on, and see the issues that you have and pay attention to them and be aware when they manifest themselves. Okay, so that's lost into this.
Oh, I agree.
Okay, that's lost into this. How can we make introspection sexy again? Okay, how can we do that?
I love the way you put it. No, you're so right. I think, David, and I'll tell you from personal experience, there was a phase that I went through as a much younger person where I would stop at every reflecting surface, look at myself, and appreciate, like, wow, that's good. And I don't see the kids doing this these days. I mean, I think I'm not going to blame social media because, again, social media has a lot of advantages, but our sense of who we are. When I was growing up, we did not have Instagram and likes and comments and followers to validate who I am.
We're going
And
to get you
now,
started on this one. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
but it's so unfortunate that when people are entering a relationship, they want to sort of get a validation for who they are, for how they are, for their
Mhm.
traits and attributes from another person. So for me, what my actual mirror was doing is now another person for a lot of people. So for them, that sort of, that mirroring of their strengths and their who they are as individuals is coming from a living being. Now, this living being is also entering the relationship with their own set of emotions, their own baggage, sometimes traumatic baggage, and they might not be able to reciprocate it. So what in turn happens is that when I don't get that sense of validation, which could actually be due to the other person's, inability to sort of reflected back to me, I start taking it as my own trait and I keep going into my shell. Now, this also becomes the starting point of toxic relationships.
Yes, we're definitely going there.
Yeah. So, I mean, when there is too much validation, then, that sort of overshadows everything else.
Okay.
And you want to stick there.
There are a few concepts that I'd like to acquaint the audience with because I'm really enjoying this conversation. Aurea mediocritas means that the middle path, somewhere in the middle, lies the truth and the way. Extremes don't help in any situation. So here's the thing. You mentioned social media, and that requires an entire show. Please come back on this broadcast. that requires an entire show by itself, but I'm just going to make a small comment here. What social media has done, which is good, is that it connects people, right? People who haven't seen each other for years because social media can now keep in touch, okay? But it couldn't stay like that for very long. You remember when Facebook first started, it was like, oh, look, friends, it's like a class reunion every day. Then the likes and the attention started because it's addictive. And so people who were not codependent before somehow adopted the trait of codependency with an inanimate object, which is even worse because at least you can counsel a person if they're codependent on the person. But you can't look at the cell phone and say, okay, just 2 hours today, okay? You can't look at the cell phone and say this,
Yeah.
especially in a clinical setting. And so I think a lot of people, it has shortened the attention span as well. And that's the dangerous part. Because when you think about it and how the human mind operates, the validation that you receive from an individual, let's say it's your mom or your dad, like a hug as an example, you got the oxytocin being spread through the body, right? It is healthy. It lasts longer. This does not last for very long. Okay? The high that you get from getting validated by 3 likes is not going to last for very long because then you have to do it again. And you have to do it again, and it develops an addiction. So you have people who may be addicted to alcohol, heroin, and so on. This is not any better. But when these people enter relationships with actual human beings, they're thinking that the human being is this.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I need validation every 5 minutes, right? Every time I see you, tell me something good about myself. Give me a thumbs up. And so that can be extremely taxing on other people. For people who have this addiction, you suggest counseling. Am I correct?
Oh, 100%. Self-love. I mean, why do we forget to love ourselves? We live with ourselves. I mean, you are in this body from the day you're born till the day you're going to die.
Hmm.
And if you yourself don't appreciate it, nobody else is going to appreciate it.
Correct.
So I'm all in for self. And I'm going to bring in Freud again. I think a little bit of narcissism is so important.
Hmm.
You have to be in love with yourself before being in love with anybody. And this could be any relationship with your parents, with your partner, even at the workplace. If you don't like yourself enough, you're going to be affected by the little blows that are coming your way. Somebody says anything and you start taking it as a personal attack. Your self-esteem sort of takes a dip. And it's a roller coaster. It's a roller coaster every day. And that's not healthy.
Yeah, it isn't. I think a lot of people, I weep for the generation beneath us. I weep for them due to the fact that self love and self esteem, when it is not self sustaining, the look in the mirror that says, yeah, I'm on the right track. When that isn't present and people are looking for validation from other people, it may be from their partners, it may be from the parents, it may be from friends, as the case may be. What happens is that there will be a point in time where you reach a level where everybody thinks I'm great, and then you start to doubt the self. You start to doubt them. Okay? Which is what happens to a lot of Instagram models, as an example. Everybody's thumbs
Yeah.
up, but are they just liking me because I look hot?
Yep.
You see how that actually sabotages the self-esteem in the same way. And I would love to write a paper on all these little nuances that we miss when we're talking about relationships, because when you are that toxic inside, and it's a toxicity because it's a need that you're trying to express, I need you to tell me that I am great. And if I don't get it, my self-esteem gets flattened. and I will try anything that I need to do to get it back up to a certain level, including false arrogance as an example. And let's talk about that. I am so vain. I am so great, like that I must shout it to the top of the mountains.
There's a saying, I think this is the English translation for it, that empty vessels make the most
Most
noise.
noise, correct.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard it in Hindi growing up, but it essentially translates to that when you know who you are, when you know that you come with substance, you don't you don't feel the need to scream or shout it out and tell people about it. You radiate with it.
Oh my
It's
God.
only,
I haven't heard that word used in about 10 years. Substance. Substance, let's delve into that concept for a while because I could see that you're from old school. Nice.
oh
Very good.
yes.
All right, let's delve into the concept of substance. I'm really enjoying this conversation. When people say substance, they don't mean how good you look.
That is
Let's
absolutely true.
right. When somebody says substance, it may not be how bright you are either. When somebody says substance, they mean the combination of characteristics that shows that I don't need the makeup, I don't need the LA Gear Fitness outfit, the Lululemon outfit, but you could see me down the road and you could tell that I am coming. I am representing a body and space and time, representing whatever you call the ancestors, whatever you're calling the descendants, and so on. I stand here, substance, the construct of substance. It is.
You've put it so well. Yeah.
It's not based on. It's not based on fads. It's not based on any of that stuff. So, as an example, let's look at Celine here. She doesn't have to doubt her own awareness, her own intuition. She doesn't have to doubt that stuff because she's practiced the concept of substance. A lot of people mistake substance for false aggrandizement. So I'm gonna tweak the audience for you. Feel free to attack me in the comments below, guys. All right? Don't attack Celine, but attack me. I'll give you a few examples of self-aggrandizement. People who dive into spirituality specifically to aggrandize the self. So when you came on, you didn't announce yourself as the divine feminine. That's an example. You didn't, you didn't announce yourself as a divine feminine Shakti, right? You didn't do that, all right? You came with Celine Kostler. A lot of people don't get that, so they put those titles, the attribution of titles, like see, just a divine masculine and a divine feminine here talking. Like there's nothing to see here, and so and so. What is this concept of taking on these titles, diving into spirituality and so on, instead of building the self up? Is it just easier?
I think it's for the sake of articulation. And sometimes when you don't know how to sort of put it across to other people, you start, using titles to make yourself more understood. But in that entire process, we sort of start labeling ourselves and we restrict ourselves to those very labels. So it's not anybody else who's labeling us, we're labeling ourselves. And I'm sort of putting myself in a box. Like, I don't know if you're a cat person, but if you see cats, they would just jump into any box and stay there. That's what we're doing. We're just going into a box and sitting there. And by choice.
Mm-hmm.
So I think to be open to different experiences, we have to understand that, like you mentioned, sorry, substance is not just one part of who you are. It is an amalgamation of so many different qualities, so many different traits. It comes from your values, your personality, your emotions, who you are as a person, your ethics in life, not just by the way you look, but the way you carry yourself. And I think, when I speak about radiating and you're walking down the street, it's not about what you're wearing. It's not about, where you are. It's just how you carry yourself, because you know that your sense of self, the person you are,
Hmm.
will not be threatened by the blows that are coming from the outside. So
Well
that
said.
becomes important. Yeah.
Well said. And a lot of people don't know how to get there. Any advice?
This is, yeah, so I'm glad you asked that question. Now, when I speak or think about the concept of therapy, this is exactly what I encourage people to do. It's not about coming for therapy when you're in the midst of despair. It
Hmm.
is about entering a space to explore who you are. Therapy is not medication, but it can be, it's a self exploratory space. You understand who you are. And that's not just for any one aspect of your life. When I know who I am, when I accept myself for who I am, there are so many things that automatically start falling into place. For instance, I may go to a singing show and audition for it, and I'm a bad singer, but I'm not self aware about it. Others would laugh at me. They would sort of tell me that this is not for you. And I would take that very personally, because in my mind, I am a good singer. Now, no offense to people who are bathroom singers, that's fine, but you have to know your skills. Maybe I'm a good dancer, but I'm not auditioning for any dancing shows because I am not aware that that is a skill that I should cultivate. So I have to be aware that this is not my forte, but there is something I am exceptionally good at. Yet, my own blindness to who I am is preventing me from even exploring that. So that becomes important to sort of transgress any boundary that you have, even with your own self.
Understood. And excellent. So I think a lot of people tend to let their experiences define them in relationships. So I've heard a number of statements, and I'm going to bring them to you, and I'm going to ask you not to cringe too much. I'm broken. What does that mean? It means that you're defining yourself from the basis of mistakes you have made or experiences you have had. So when somebody says I'm broken, and actually it's become quite a fad now that I see on social media, people getting on social media, and I use social media as a reflection for a lot of the stuff that's in society. So if you wanted to find a little microcosm of some of the dysfunction that may be present in your locality, check the local social media page, right? So, right? And so
I,
people describing themselves as I'm broken, I'm not okay. What does that mean? What advice do you have for these people?
so the way I see it, David, is that when we get into a relationship,
Hmm.
and the very age-old saying that your better half. Now, I like to see it in a different way. I like to, I like to
I
see it
asked,
in this.
I asked you not to cringe, but I'm cringing. I'm like,
Oh, I see that, and so what happens is essentially when we're attracted to somebody, and if we actually go into the reason why we're attracted to them, is because they have certain qualities that we want to emulate. Now, when I am with this person, I start emulating those qualities. I start building on them. It's like my source of energy from where that quality is being fueled in me. When this person goes away, they also take the source of that energy with them. So I may not be a very outgoing person, but I want to be an outgoing person. So I start seeing somebody who's extremely outgoing. I'm going out every day. I'm enjoying. I'm having a good time. Now that this person goes out, there's nobody to take initiative. There's nobody to sort of push me. And I start feeling a void. That's when I feel I'm broken. So essentially, a person going away is very symbolic of what they're taking with them.
mhm.
And what was it that they were sort of, completing in your life, which is no longer there. However, that being said, once you recognize what is it that you're seeking from the other person, you can cultivate it within you.
Mm.
Start going out, dress up, go out, be on the road. Just, randomly go to a pub, sit, have a drink, be by yourself. Enjoy your time with yourself. That is what you were looking for. So I
Yeah.
think broken then becomes symbolic of all these traits being taken. It's never a person. It's always what they add to your life. that moves away with them.
Yeah, I think a lot of the dysfunction that we're seeing in relationships have become I think a lot of the media now, and that's not just social media, just media in general, has made dysfunction a very sexy thing. I'll give you a few examples to this route. I can't live with or without you. With or without you. Every Katy Perry song ever made, right? You look like my next what is the name?
Mistake.
Yes, you look like my next mistake. I listen to these songs like the brain listens passively, right? And then all of a sudden you're like, am I wait, did you just say that you look like my next mistake? I can't live with or without you. Okay, well that's a really bad situation to be in then, right? I would do anything for you. I would do anything for love. I would do anything for love. I'm like, okay, why is this function all of a sudden sexy? Any ideas? Because I've been trying to figure this one out for a while.
I think we've all made our peace with living in dysfunction. So rather than seeing it as a bad thing, we're now glorifying it. Like, hey, we're all in it, so why not celebrate it? There you go.
I want to tell you this really funny story, right? So I have my playlist because I'm coming from the gym. I'm going to stop at the supermarket. I'm going to pick up some bananas and so on. And I believe it's Lana. I can't remember what her name is. I effed my way up to the top. You've heard that song, right?
I might have, yeah.
Right. So I'm playing this in the car, right? And I'm parked in the car. I can't remember the name of this artist. It's Lana something.
Lana
Anyway,
Del Rey, I think. I'm not
yes,
sure either.
right. And it's like it's basically I effed my way up to the top. It's repeated in this song. I park the car. I get out of the car, right? Right. And obviously the song is still playing because it's linked to my phone. And the 86-year-old grandmother is singing the lyrics to that song. You know, like that. You know what that does to the mind, right? And is that's.
I know what you're saying.
I'm like, what the hell? First of all, how you singing this song? How old are you? Anyway, never mind. The point of the matter is it's infectious. A lot of people sing it, and by rote they learn. They learn, and the learning is not just superficial learning. They embody the lyrics of a lot of these dysfunctional songs. And they don't
I
think that
agree.
they're living unless they're living in dysfunctional. So, like, I have had people who have been in my office who have no problems with each other, and that's the problem,
Yeah.
right? That's the problem because they don't think that they're living unless they're living like Sex in the City, like what other sitcoms there are, the dysfunctional stuff, right? They don't think that they're living. It's like they think that they're like the fear of missing out on all the good fighting and disloyalty and
Oh
stuff that they
my.
could be had out there, right? And I am wondering, where did dysfunction suddenly become so sexy that it actually is programming people, and that's a word that we want to use here. People become programmed into dysfunction, people who otherwise would have been fine. Like, I was raised in a TM center when I was young, okay? And I think there is something between those formative years. If you get it correctly, the rest of your life tends to go well. But if you get that part, that those formative years when people are drinking, smoking, doing drugs, and getting into trouble, if you get that wrong, you begin to slide down a totally different path. Your thoughts?
I agree. And you know what? I do believe it's never about the substance, it's about self control. It's about letting an individual or an object take control of who you are.
Mhm.
So like you said, in your formative years, if you have the ability to exert that sort of will to stay away from it, then that develops and sort of integrates into your personality as well. And, when we speak of dysfunction, you're right. Sometimes the patterns that I've seen growing up, they become so normal that if I don't have it, it seems like I'm not loved. So if somebody's not fighting with me, and for me, I have grown up seeing love as constant fights, constant arguments, and you're not doing that to me, then in my head, you don't love me.
Or you
It's
don't
not
care.
there. You
Yeah.
don't care. You don't care enough. So refiguring those patterns and going back on it and reflecting, like you said, introspection remains the key. Then why is it that I'm seeking that sort of a stimulation in a relationship? And dysfunction also, I think, because of the lack of a lot of other activities that an individual is doing, we sort of depend on our partners to give us that thrill. I'm going to call it thrill for the lack of a better word, because there is an adrenaline rush. You're on your guard. You're like, how am I going to navigate this today? I'll give you a fun example. I actually went to ChatGPT the other day and Googled, give me 10 topics to fight about being in a toxic relationship. And ChatGPT did a good job. So that lack of stimulation sometimes can create such a big void that you want to fill it up. And rather than filling it up with positive activities, we tend to go back on the patterns that we've seen, that we've been raised with, that we've been, seeing in the movies as well.
Yeah, because it's more popular.
It's more popular, you're right.
I'm going to make a statement to you, and I want you to respond. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Oh, God. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Your thoughts?
Well, we're still in the same universe, which means that we do share the same abilities. And I think that men have also, and oh my God, this broadcast is going to get a lot of hate comments.
Oh, I'm sure they're going to press ahead.
A good thing we're self-aware and we don't take it to heart, but
That's correct.
sometimes. But oh, sorry, coming back. I think the way we've been raised up, and this is universal, that we have certain attributed traits that men have to be, they don't have to, they have to be very nonchalant, as if it's okay, I'm not going to get into this, but this is not something that concerns me, but it does concern them. And for women also to sort of, let go of the traits that a lot of cultures, and this is the 21st century. I'm a 21st century woman, but I do see the subtle cultural nuances that, women and men are raised with. It shows up. And then we want to adhere to those stereotypes, because if somebody's putting you in those stereotypes, then might as well act like it. I mean, if I'm being blamed for a mistake that I've not made, might as well make the mistake.
Okay, so this very popular book that was written way back when made some very broad generalizations. I entreat people, if you want to learn about relationships, there's an old text, the Kama Sutra. It actually translates to love lessons. It has nothing to do with sexual positions, which, oh my God, that, like, there are only 8 pages in that book that is devoted to, anyway, never mind. Right, but it gives you an entire treatise on the concept of human relationships. And it wasn't just written in India, it was like amalgamation of all the thoughts at the time. So I would like you guys to probably read that. That is a better book than saying men are from Mars and women are from Venus. Because the dangers that I think that book brought was people began to expect and accept certain traits, right? And that's dangerous, because when you come with presuppositions, as well, we all come with presuppositions, but when they're hardwired on you, to say, as an example, if you're a woman and I speak to you and you have presuppositions, like, honestly, Celine, I actually don't deal with the presuppositions anymore. I just kind of ignore them completely. And I'll explain what I mean by that. And I come to speak to you. You are expecting a few things from me. You're expecting a focus on body consciousness, the physical. I'm just talking generally. You're expecting a lack of the ability to communicate in emotional or emotive terms. You're expecting some sort of interaction which is more superficial than most, okay? Based on traditional stereotypes. When I look at you, I'm expecting a totally emotional reaction devoid of logic. I am expecting you not to listen to anything that I have to say and to just concentrate on your emotions. And I am expecting you to, I don't know, try to get me into some sort of manipulative position. These are the stereotypes that are out there. And so you hear generalizations like all these women are alike, all these men are alike. It's a generalization. They know it to be a generalization. Does it matter? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So as an example, I was actually, and I'm going to tell you my own personal experience. About 2 weeks ago, I met one of the last Ursuline nuns in Canada. There are only 25 of them in the area generally where I live. There are only 25 of them. And it was such a relief to talk to, she's 86 years old. It was such a relief to talk to this elderly woman because there were no masks available. There were no there were no masks available. I didn't have to worry about the male-female barrier. I didn't have to worry about the age barrier. I didn't have to worry about any of that stuff. It was just pure communication. It was free communication, free interaction, devoid of all the little things that are in the air. Does that make sense? But I think that a lot of people do not have that on board anymore. And so they live in little secluded shells. And so they can't interact with the opposite sex. They can't interact with family members. They can't even interact with people at work because of those little masks or things that are in the air. How can we help them clear the air so that genuine interaction between people is happening? And it has to do with their experiences as well. But how can they help clear the air so that they can actually have genuine and meaningful interaction, because you grow in interactions like that?
I think the skepticism these days is also coming from the fact that our level of tolerance as an entirety it's gone down. One wrong thing that you say can be seen in such a derogatory manner that you sort of retract back. So as individuals, we need to have the patience and the tolerance to be able to understand that sometimes what is being communicated has the right intent, maybe not the right words. And this is not to say that we let people walk all over us or humiliate us. But in a conversation, the reason that most of us are holding back, I feel, is because we're always walking around eggshells. So that being said, opening up, being yourself, becomes the first and foremost step. And the second is something, as you mentioned, the Pygmalion effect. Now, for the audiences, if they're not aware about it, I'm sure, we've read about it extensively. Essentially, if I go in a classroom and I'm told that, section A is a class full of notorious students and section B is a class full of high achievers, and somebody from section A asks me a question, I would probably dismiss that student feeling that, they're not good enough anyway, so they're not going to learn. So even before I'm entering that classroom or interacting with them, I have a preset notion. Now, when I interact with them that way, and this is, of course, an explanation for the audience, when I enter the class and dismiss this child's questions, the child would start feeling that the questions are not important, or that maybe they're not actually good enough to be asking those questions. As a result of it, end of the term, I would realize that section A scores way below section B, despite being smarter. Why? Because I started with a presumption, with a predisposition that impacted not just my thinking of who these people are, but their ideology of who I am, the entire dynamics, and also who they are. So going into the workplace, for instance, and going with the idea that you can't open up to people means that you will be reserved. When you're reserved, the other person sort of feels that, oh, this person's aloof. Maybe I shouldn't interact too much with this coworker because they like to keep to themselves. And then the cycle begins. There's no end to it. It's a vicious cycle.
Okay, so you mentioned something that's very important there. Uh, Being yourself. A lot of people don't know who themselves are, right? They have been hijacked by whatever's out there. These are people that are on a ship sailing away. Your thoughts on grounding these people into some sense of self identity?
Just asking yourself the question, who am I? Write it on a piece of paper, sit with it for 10 minutes, and I'm sure it's not going to be 10 minutes. You'll be stuck with that question for the next couple of days. Because it's a simple question, who am I? 3 words. But the answer to that is so complicated that sometimes we spend our entire lives trying to understand who we are.
Agreed. Agreed. Okay, so I want to deal with one more topic because, this could go on for a while. I want to deal with one more topic, and that is the topic of identity. Okay. And I'm going to bring in some pseudo spiritual concepts in here as well. When we tell people be present in your relationship, okay, give me a second. I'm going to try to keep a straight face, Rod. Be present in your relationship. That is harder. That's easier said than done. That's harder than it looks. Because being present in the relationships means that whatever baggage I had is in the back, and whatever aspirations I have is in the front, and we're just here right now, just you and me. What are in your opinion, are the pros and cons of this approach?
Well, being present can be a wonderful topic, but I see that it is being misinterpreted in a way wherein the concept of being present is leading to more frivolous relationships wherein people are jumping from one partner to the other. And again, it is a personal choice. There is no judgment behind it. My concern remains the reason for this sort of a thing. Is it that you're finding it hard to attach yourself to one person? Is it deeper than wanting to be with multiple people? Does it go deeper to the fact that as soon as your vulnerabilities kick in, you want to sort of move out of it and go on to the next? So when you say being present and being in the present with a partner, of course there are considerations from the past and from the future that will seep in. Most of the conflicts that happen in a relationship are either because of an individual's past or because they're not aligning on their future goals. However, that being said, the focus has to be more solution oriented. What we do is keep thinking about the problems, not about the solutions. And sometimes the way we communicate, most of the communications, like you said, because of social media and other forms of communication are happening on WhatsApp, on FaceTime, or video calls. We don't sit in front of each other. It's all on text. I don't know the tone of what you're saying. I perceive that it is a certain tone. What if it isn't?
Yes, an exclamation point could make a big difference to your relationship.
Oh my God. Yep, that's where it all begins. Let's bring out the swords.
Right, and stop. Listen, they try to assist this by putting emoticons in there, but look, listen. If you have a major issue in your relationship, don't sort it out over text. Don't sort it out over, oh, wow. Like a simple exclamation point could mean the end of your relationship, depending on how much baggage that person has, and so on. And for heaven's sake, please stop using the capital letters function. Stop it.
I know. Oh, that function needs to go away.
Right? Stop using the capital letters function. It's so wrong. Listen, because everybody assumes that you're shouting, right?
Of course.
And so I have had too many situations, even in an office situation when I was working in Toronto, where people have just mistyped
Oh,
and caused huge upheavals in the office. But I didn't mean that. So why didn't you just voice note it? Voice noting is acceptable form of communication, you know that, right? And it's even faster than typing. Why would you not voice note? So
well,
people
that
can
is
at
true.
least hear your tone. But yeah, honestly, guys, we've come to the end of our broadcast. But what I can say for you guys, I want is that if you are going to be in relationships with people, be mindful of your communication pattern, which is what we discussed, right? All those precognitions or the preconceptions that you have of people, you might want to review them, see what is embedded in your baggage, right? Also, pay attention to where you would like to be, all right? Because a lot of people talk, we didn't talk about that, but we're going to be talking about that in the future. Where would you like to be? Because a lot of people don't have a plan, Stan, right? It's like I meet you in a bar and we're good for today, we're good for tomorrow, we're good the next day. There is no plan, there is no movement, there is no growth. And so these are the things that I would have to say. Celine, give us the rest of that. Give us whatever you have to say where relationships are concerned.
I think you've summed it up pretty well, David. But just to add to it, I think it's all starts with being a little patient first with your own self before you enter into an alliance with another person. Could be at work, could be with a family member or with a romantic partner. But give yourself that time, space, and acceptance to truly know who you are, to truly know what you want. That's not what the other person wants, but what are you looking for? What are your goals in life? Like you said, to have a plan. And the people who are coming into your lives, are they fitting in well with that plan? Or is it sort of causing a turmoil and you're all over the place? So
Yeah.
understand who you are first. What do you want? And accept it. Accept your flaws. Flaws are not a bad thing. We make it seem as if it's a negative connotation, but it only tells you what your strengths and weaknesses are. And sometimes, well, most of the times, you can actually work on those weaknesses. But if I don't know what I don't know, how do I work on it?
Hmm. Well said. Well said. Celine, give these people a way to get a hold of you because I'm quite sure there's some people who would want to talk to you about this.
So they can reach out to me via Instagram, which is Mindchimes, Mindchimes, or I am very available on the email. My email ID is drselenek@gmail.com. So I'd be happy to answer any questions over email or if they want to get in touch. I do have a couple of videos that I've posted on the Instagram account as well about toxic relationships, about understanding ourselves better. So I think those could also be helpful resources.
And for those of you who are looking for a counselor, as you can see, she is very familiar with technology, so she can do Zoom. If you guys are looking for a counselor, reach out to this lady. I highly recommend her because she knows her stuff. She does. And
Thank
so
you.
you're welcome. And so we've come to the end of our broadcast. Celine, just say goodbye to these people, and we will see you the next time.
Thank you for having me, David. Bye bye.
Bye bye.